Welcome to the Wine Yogi. I'm your guide, Crystal, and I'm here to help you navigate your way through the wonderful world of wine and all its heady associates, craft beers, spirits, and gourmet foods, with the knowledge of a sommelier, the sometimes calm patience of a yoga instructor, and of course the wacky humor of a former Air Force pilot, stay-at-home mama, and a girl raised in the South. So let's get chatting about wine. Welcome to this episode of the Wine Yogi. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion on wines and specifically regions today that are not in my top 10 favorite all-time deathbed stuck on a desert island wines. And the reason why I wanted to focus on wines that are not my favorite, because, well, I wanted to make sure you knew that, yes, there are actually wines out there that I do kind of turn my nose up to. And that has nothing to do with whether it comes in a box, screw cap, or it's only $5. That actually plays very little into the reasons why I don't like certain wines. But my goal in sharing this with you is I just wanted to make sure you understood that no matter what I say here, no matter what wines I gush about, it really comes down to what you like. So if you are invited to a friend's house and they say, oh my gosh, this is my favorite wine, and you're just not digging it, I'm just here to let you know that is okay. If you are out on a fancy date and whoever is treating you to a night out on the town says, allow me to order the wine, I want you to try this, and it really just doesn't go with your meal, or for whatever reason it's just not clicking, I'm here to tell you, it is okay. Wine is a lot like yoga. Some things appeal to you in your practice and where you're at on that particular day in your body. Sometimes I can be as bendy as I want. I feel really good. My muscles feel good. My joints feel good. My back, my hips, everything. I can do no wrong when I come onto my yoga mat, and it's amazing. There are other days where I have injured my back while sleeping, or maybe I just turned to go brush my teeth in the bathroom and I threw something out. And so when I come to my yoga mat, it may be with a little bit of a few tears, certainly a lot of groaning, and it's not exactly the most enjoyable experience until I'm done. And I kind of work through some of those cricks, pops, snap, crackle, pop that's going on within my own body. So I just want to let you know the same is true with wine, your wine tasting experience. Some days, everything you taste is the best wine you've ever had. It just, with each next, wine you try, as you're doing a typical tasting and you're tasting, 3 or 4 different wines, and each one just improves upon the last. And oh my gosh, this is just the most amazing wine tasting I've ever had. And then there are other days where you're just like, oh my God, this tastes terrible. This tastes terrible. This smells horrible. I don't even want to taste it because of the way it smells. And there's no amount of pairing it with the perfect food, nothing that can improve the overall experience. And that's because, like our bodies, our palates change. They can change from day to day, month to month, year to year, decade to decade. As we get older, our taste buds certainly change. And I've heard from more than one friend that, especially after they've experienced the change and gone through menopause, their taste buds have changed. And perhaps they can't handle spicy food that they once had. Or maybe they were big red wine drinkers, and then all of a sudden, red wine just did not agree with them anymore, and something shifted within their hormones that affected their overall palate. And I'm saying a prayer to God right now, please don't let that happen to me, because I'm going through the change right now, and I really don't want to lose certain things that I enjoy. So I'm going to make sure that that doesn't happen. Come hell or high water, my brain is the most powerful muscle in my body, and I am going to continue to appreciate the wines that I appreciate right now. But I just want to let you know that it's totally all right. If you want to have a white wine with a steak, I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to help you find and discover what clicks in your palate at any given time. So always come to things with an open mind. So we're going to be discussing a couple of red wines today that are not my favorites. And I still taste them. I still buy them. I still keep trying to give them another chance. I keep coming back to them with an open mind. So just like when I wake up in the morning with a stiff back, or perhaps my hips take a good solid 4 minutes to engage while I'm standing there at the side of my bed, and to which my husband then is like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Like, just waiting for my hips to engage for a minute before I actually take a step to avoid falling down. When those days happen, sometimes you just kind of have to accept, well, you know what? This is just not going to be a good wine day for me. And maybe you just switch it over to tea, or, have a cup of coffee or something like that, or, just have something else. Maybe that's when you just bust out the margaritas. I don't know. Every day could be margarita day. But today's podcast is going to focus on a region in California, which is extremely popular, but I struggle. I struggle with this region mainly because of the terroir of this particular region. And it's ironic because a lot of the things that are happening in this particular region out of California are reminiscent of old world winemaking techniques. And perhaps I'm holding out hope that I will finally find some wines coming out of this particular growing region that I can really enjoy and appreciate. And then I'm also going to mention one particular varietal that I struggle with. And I think in part it has to do with old world versus new world production. So first, let's touch base on the region that I'm talking about, and that is Lodi, California. You have probably heard of Zinfandel, a red wine, not the white Zinfandel, but the traditional Zinfandel red grape wine coming out of Lodi, California. That's pretty much what put Lodi on the map in terms of winemaking. And if you can imagine where Sacramento is, so you're up in Northern California, east of San Francisco. So you're kind of heading, towards Napa, but you're not quite there. It's a little further south. But you're definitely heading east out of San Francisco, heading towards Sacramento. And that's where you're going to come into Lodi. And Lodi is known for its terroir. It has some interesting soil that is influenced by this river valley that Lodi, for the most part, most of the vineyards are growing in. And I'm not going to get into the details of why all of the soil and the different alluvial levels of loam versus sand, why it impacts it. But suffice it to say, it is very comparable to a lot of your French growing regions, particularly because in France, they're growing everything along rivers, and that river influence is pretty significant in the grapes and the terroir especially. So there's a reason why Bordeaux wine, for example, depending on which side of the bank you're coming from, may have certain things on the nose and on the palate, whether it's granite or barnyard. All of those things are a result of what happens when those vines reach their roots down into the soil, and the amount of water from rain, if it's irrigated, whatever is going on for the water and the moisture that's being introduced to the grapes, all of that is influencing the fruit that is going to be produced on those vines. Then it becomes a question of the techniques used to make the wine itself. Are they introducing man-made techniques to encourage certain fermentations to happen? Are they putting it in specific barrels that have maybe at one point been holding bourbon, or perhaps barrels that have different types of char on them, or perhaps they are trying to pull something out of the grapes themselves into the wine, therefore they're picking a specific style of barrel that's a little bit more pronounced. All of these things influence your finished product that you enjoy in your glass. So when we talk about Lodi, one of the challenges I have with Lodi, and I have this challenge with a lot of New World wine producers, but with Lodi, because of the intensity of the fruit on the nose, there is a slight funkiness to it that is a little bit offsetting to my sense of smell. You may absolutely love it. And I'm not trying to say that what you enjoy is by any means wrong. It's not. For me, it's just a challenge, and I have to be willing to go beyond that initial impression. It's why it took me years before I could actually drink certain wines from Bordeaux and Burgundy. And that was because of the overwhelming either manure or barnyard smell, or if it was a white wine like a Bordeaux Blanc, the pipi le chat, the cat pee, cat urine smell. Years of continuing to smell, to taste, and slowly appreciation began to develop. It's kind of like that scene from Pretty Woman when Richard Gere takes Julia Roberts. They go to the opera, and he says to her, now, for people, their first experience with opera, you either love it or you hate it. Now, if you hate it, you can learn to appreciate it, but you will never love it like someone who from their first exposure to opera loves it. I loved opera, by the way. First time I saw it, loved it. So I'm in that category. But when you are exposed to wines that are at first not your jam, not your favorite smell, not your favorite taste on the palate, maybe it just doesn't agree with you on that particular day, I try to remain open and I keep going back. So I have been in this process with Lodi for a while, and I keep trying to find those wines from Lodi that kind of scratch that itch of what I'm looking for. I have had some Old Vine Carignan out of Lodi. That is another red grape that you often see as a blending grape. But thus far, the most popular grape coming out of Lodi is Zinfandel, and I tend to have issues with the Zins coming out of there. So Zinfandel itself is known for blackberry fruit, a lot of, berry on the nose and on the palate. So it could be, either that darker black, it could be more in that red raspberry, even kind of just that, think of the blackberry raspberry style fruit has a little bit of pop in it. And it certainly can easily take on a lot of jam components as well in wine. And then Zinfandel is also known for a black pepper. And I love black pepper, love cracked black pepper. But when I have Old Vine, especially Zinfandel, and Old Vine is a term that is a little nebulous. You will see it frequently referenced on your labels coming out of New World wine producers, where they're trying to indicate a certain established length of time these vines have been producing. It can range from 25, 30 years to 100 years. But just because you see Old Vine, don't naturally assume that it's in that later stage, that 100-year, especially if it is a lower priced wine. If it's in a reasonable price range, in that $10 price range, and it says Old Vine, it's probably an average. They may have some of those older 70-year, 60-year-old vines mixed in there, but just think about as vines age like that, they're going to produce less and less fruit. So it's probably more typically an average age, or they're just going to list the oldest vines in there, but there's probably some younger must thrown in there from some younger vines just to get the quality levels up. Otherwise, you're going to charge a lot more because old vines produce less fruit. So when you are looking at Lodi Zinfandel, it really has the intense black and red berry fruit on it, and it has some pretty significant black pepper. And for me, it's not fresh cracked black pepper. And this is where the terroir comes in. It has almost a black pepper that maybe you picked up at your local grocery store that has been ground up for you. It's not fresh cracked black pepper, and it's still really good black pepper. But perhaps it's just slightly tinny, has a little bit of the stored spice flavoring to it, and it's not that fresh. I just ground the pepper onto, say, my salad. And that's the kind of cracked black pepper I like. I often use, ground pepper when it's easy in recipes, when I'm doing a lot of cooking, just simply for measuring sake, especially when I am doing specific requirements that I need pepper. But my favorite way of having pepper is when it's freaking right there from a peppercorn and I crack it myself with my amazing black pepper grinder. So that is the combination of having a fruit forward, fruit bomb kind of on the nose and on the palate, and then to have kind of black pepper that to me doesn't hold up to that because it's not, there's just something there and I can't always put my finger on it. Sometimes it takes on a dried green herb flavor, and that can often be from the American oak barrel that might be used during the aging process of the Zinfandel wine. American oak often has a dill smell about it on the nose, and that can come through as a green herb. And for me, it's kind of in that tarragon realm. And while tarragon, I like it in small quantities, it has a bit of the black licorice candy, not like anise, not a fennel, but an actual, the black candy licorice. And that for me is just a little unsettling. And I think that's kind of the best way to describe the black pepper that I get off of Lodi Zinfandel. And I continue to search. I continue to work not only as a connoisseur and someone who loves wine, but just professionally, because I don't want to ever make someone feel that their choice in wine, unless it's white Zinfandel, and then I am judging you. Sorry. But I'm kidding. No, I'm not. I am seeking to find kind of that happy medium that I can appreciate certain wines from Lodi so I can recommend them to people who really enjoy Lodi wines, because I am terrible at, unfortunately, hiding my expressions on my face. If I don't like something, it's pretty much evident right there, especially when I am smelling it and sipping it. And so, as I said, just to be a better sommelier, it's kind of like with yoga. There are certain poses I don't like, probably because I can't do them. I can't do them to the level at which I wish I could do them, and so they frustrate me. Sometimes it's a physical limitation. Sometimes it's I just don't like this pose. I don't like it. It makes me work. There are a lot of poses like that. Engage my core. What? So I kind of regard Lodi wines in that realm. Now, like I said, there are some that I am encouraged by, and I am encouraged by some recent winemakers out of Lodi that are looking to go, quote, native. So if you find a Lodi native wine, it's a project that's going on where they are not introducing commercialized yeast for the fermentation process. They're not forcing malolactic fermentation by introducing a secondary fermentation. They're allowing it to occur naturally. They are using neutral oak, so they're not pulling anything out of the oak. Lots of different things that they're doing that I would say are more on par with old world winemaking techniques. They are also not acidifying their wine. Now, what does that mean? So if you think about some of our discussions in previous podcasts about wine, there's more than one type of acid that occurs in wine. So in most wine, you will have malic acid, citric acid. You can have lactic acid if malolactic fermentation has taken place and the malic acid has shifted to lactic acid, which usually happens with red wine. Often you see it in Chardonnay. And then you have a succinic acid, which it's lower down in the throat. So what happens with these acids is in the old world, they just let them be. And what happens. If there's secondary fermentation, malolactic fermentation, they're not going to diminish the end result by amplifying, say, the citric acid. But in the New World, oftentimes they are going to acidify their wines. And part of it is for storage, the ability to then ship it throughout, distribute it throughout the United States. And then it's going to sit on shelves. So part of the reason why they are doing that is a shelf life thing. Because it's kind of a way to prolong the profiles that they have sought to create without allowing that wine to really begin to shift and change. Old world winemakers, especially when you're going into some of these villages, say you're in Italy on vacation and you go into a small village, that's the reason why the wines there are so fresh and lively and vibrant and so enjoyable. Part of it is you're in Italy. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But the other part of it is because there's so many things happening on the palate because of these layers of different acids, they will hit different parts of your actual palate, whether it's the tip of the tongue, throughout the mouth, back of the throat. And so it's a much more pleasurable experience. Whereas here in the New World, it is more about consumption, not as much about enjoying the wine with food. So that's why the acidity levels in your Old World wines tend to be slightly higher, especially, they're on par in red wines with the tannins. You can have medium acidity, medium tannic structure in what you would construe as a big tannic wine if it were being produced in the New World. And certainly when you're looking at red wines, those kinds of things play into what the wine makers are trying to do. If they really want to emphasize tannic structure and they want a big tannic wine, they're going to manipulate the wine when they're elevating it at the very end to make sure that that's what shines through and that the acids are somewhat supporting role players in the final wine. So lots going on. I'm going to hold out hope and I'm going to keep trying those wines from Lodi. And I did want to talk about probably my least favorite varietal of red wines out there. And it's in part not because of the movie Sideways, but when Paul Giacomo's character says, "I'm not going to drink the Merlot." Oh my God, that sung to my heart. I was like, I love you. Yes, I'm not going to drink the Merlot. I don't like Merlot. I like it in a Bordeaux blend. I like Old World Merlot. But there's just something about New World Merlot. It can be, again, the fruit. It can overwhelm the palate. I'm not a huge fruit. If you haven't picked up on it, I am not a huge fruit bomb fan. I have had some Cab Savs that were nothing but fruit bombs, and it almost made me cry because this was not an inexpensive bottle of wine, and it was old too, and I was less than thrilled because it was my bottle, and it was a fruit bomb, and there was no amount of aging that was going to calm that fruit down in the Cab Sav. And so what I find when I keep trying them, what I find from a lot of especially California winemakers when it comes to Merlot, a little bit with Washington State, although I actually can enjoy some Merlot out of Washington State. I probably prefer that to the ones coming out of California, and that's even coming out of Napa. I'll be honest. But the Merlots here definitely see a lot of the fruit forward notes happening. And while I absolutely love plum and cherry, if they are amplified, if they are exaggerated, it is too much. And especially if it is lacking in the acid, which again, going back to what I was just discussing, if it is an acidified wine, it lingers on my palate, and my palate reacts to it in a way that I need something else. I need black pepper. I need fennel. I need rosemary or pine or something. I just need something to cut through that dark fruit of that plum and cherry. So when you look at the Old World Merlots, I actually find them to be, they have just a little bit more funkiness and a little bit more savory than, say, a California Merlot. And I think a lot of that has to do with the climate that Merlot is being grown in. So you're looking at Bordeaux, along the right bank of the Bordeaux River. So those grapes are naturally going to have higher acidity. The fruit and sugars aren't going to develop as much as they will in warmer climates. And again, that's one of my issues with Lodi. It's a pretty warm climate, and it can produce those richer fruit notes that can just, for whatever reason, with my palate, can overwhelm it. And I struggle to find foods to pair them with, to kind of cut through that. And while I'm the first to suggest certain wines with certain foods, these challenge me because it is something that interacts with my palate that is just not pleasant. So when you are looking at getting into, say, even the Chilean, South African Merlots, I would choose those over California, to be quite honest. And again, it's just because of where they're being grown at. Those are going to be more in that French style, slightly cooler climates, and a little bit enough of a funkiness that it cuts through that dark sweet cherry, rich plum, fig notes going on. But yet I'm still trying. I am still, like I said, if I had to choose between New World, and I'm not in South America or South Africa, I would probably be looking at Columbia Valley. To me, that's going to have at least something else to counteract all of the black fruit, dark black fruit that's going on. And I do need that. The other thing about Merlot that is challenging for me in those warmer climates is the floral notes. And if you've had a chance to listen to my podcast on Torrontés, I just think I have issues with wines and foods in general that have a lot of floral associated with them. And whether it's lavender, ooh, tastes like soap in my mouth, or even some of your rosebud, roses, geranium, it's a challenge for me. While I like it on the nose, when I get it on the palate, it does something, it interacts with my palate and my taste buds that is just slightly offsetting. I keep tasting, I keep trying them. I have had a couple of Napa Valley Merlots, couple out of Sonoma. But again, these are not my, oh my gosh, you know what I'm really craving right now kind of wines. They're not. I am on day 29 of a 30-day cleanse, and I haven't had wine since New Year's Eve. So it's January 29th when I'm doing this podcast. Merlot is not on my list of wines that I'm ready to taste. It will be interesting to see how my palate responds after going for a month without tasting any wine whatsoever. Well, I did have communion a couple times. So that doesn't count, though. That's like White Zinfandel. So, and it was because of Jesus. So, but it will be interesting to see when I go in, I work the wine tasting this weekend, because I am working, how my palate has shifted, if it has shifted. And much like with yoga, it's all about observing, noticing. Sometimes the shifts in your yoga practice are much like the shifts in your wine tasting. It, as I said, could depend on the day, the month, the year. It could just depend on the hour and where you're at, whether it's how your body is feeling or how your palate is feeling. Did you just brush your teeth? Have you been chewing some gum? Did you just have a meal that had a lot of garlic or other super strong flavors going on? All of that wraps into what you're going to be tasting when you sit down and get busy with a wine tasting. But I just wanted to share my impressions of the wines that are my least favorite. And you notice I always have caveats, but I like it from here. I like it from there. And so I keep searching. I keep giving them a chance. I'm kind of like that girlfriend that every time your boyfriend from Lodi comes back. Okay, I'm going to give you one more shot. And I do every time. I'm a sucker, especially for the big, big blue eyes, brown eyes, puppy dog eyes looking at me saying, but I'm old vine. I'm native. That's going to get me every time. So I'm going to keep trying them. And that's what I encourage you to do as well. So even if you have always been a Chardonnay girl, I applaud you for that. Keep enjoying your Chardonnay. But on occasion, branch out. Try something new. You might discover you like some other wines out there as well. And it's funny because I have so many friends I only drink red wine. Only drink red wine. Well, you want to try this one? Wow, I really like that one. I actually bought 2 bottles of that white wine because it was fabulous. So you can always find something that appeals to your palate. But just remember, when you buy that wine and then you go and have it on a different day, there may be a reason why it doesn't taste as good. And that there's actually an app out there. I don't have it, and I don't know what it's called. Otherwise, I'd recommend it to you. It talks about whether it's a root, leaf, or vine day. And it kind of lets you know, oh, today's going to be a really bad wine tasting day based off of, I have no idea what goes into it. I think it's kind of like your astrology horoscope done in the paper every day. So it's kind of, you can look into it and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why, because it's a root day. So, but I hope this helps. I hope it helps you realize that it doesn't matter if you don't like it and everybody around you does. It's totally okay. It's your palate. It's your wine tasting experience. It's your yoga practice. So honor it. Honor what your taste buds like. Honor what your body enjoys. And just be happy with that. So until next time, cheers and namaste. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Wine Yogi. Please be sure to check out IamTheWineYogi.com for any updates to my schedule, current yoga classes that I'm offering online, and of course, wine tastings. Also, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast so that you can get updated on all the latest and greatest Wine Yogi podcasts. Until next time, cheers and namaste.